So welcome. It's the first meeting in April. I want to talk a little bit about the weather here in the Mid-Atlantic region. I know some of you are second-year beekeepers, and then there's others who don't have their bees yet and everything in between. One of the things that I had conversations about this week was insulating your hives. If you're a multi-year beekeeper, some people have chosen to insulate their hives, and the question is, when do they take the insulation off? Some beekeepers have already done inspections. They've done reversals. I know beekeepers who've done splits. I've just hardly peeked into the top of my hives to see what's going on. And I have insulated hives with polystyrene, but if I had insulated hives, I would have left the insulation on. And that would have been words of wisdom with the roller coaster weather that we have here in early spring for the mid-Atlantic all the way up north to, Vermont down to even Maryland and below. It's cold. It was below 30 degrees this morning, and it's going to be near there tomorrow morning. And the insulation does not so much to keep them warm, but keep this in mind. If you're a first-year beekeeper and you're wondering whether you should be insulating your hives, one of the massive benefits is it helps the bees retain resources by holding on to whatever residual heat they have. And additionally, this time of year, when they're trying to get started after coming out of a long, hard winter and they're stressed and they've worked trying to get to those warm spring days, keeping a more constant temperature inside the colony when they're trying to rear up brood is so advantageous for them this time of year. Insulation doesn't necessarily keep them warmer, but one of the things it does is slows down that really big swing of like immediate cold or warm or whatever is going on. It kind of levels that out. And the bees have more time to respond and keep pace with the change in the ambient temperature. And so I always coach people, if you're going to take off your insulation, the reason you should take it off is because it's in the way of your management practices. One of the management practices for spring is to do a spring reversal. Bees have moved up in underneath the inner cover, and they're all in the top box. A common tactic, which is a decent tactic, is to take the top box and put it down on the bottom board, take the bottom board or the bottom box and put it over top. One of the things that happens if you do that too early, though, is you put them down at the cold entrance, cold air coming in, and they have to compensate for that. But that's right around the corner from a timing standpoint. And you can't do a spring reversal without taking the insulation off. And then once you take it off, I don't know, do you really want to go through the machinations of putting it back on again? And so from that perspective, if you had insulation, I would linger as much as possible. And you get a week like this and you feel really smart. So keep that in mind as you go on your beekeeping journey. I covered something on my podcast this week called the Hive Hugger. You can go to the box store like we did and buy 2-inch foam XPS installation and use straps and put that stuff around. This is now a water jet cut kit that you can buy. And I know, you could spend a lot of money on beekeeping, but it would be nice to buy a kit that you could just walk out and assemble and put around and insulate your hives. Last word on this is the number one thing you should do, brand new beekeeper or seasoned beekeeper alike, is to put a 2-inch foam insulation over top of your inner cover. In the wintertime, it helps to maintain whatever residual heat is coming off. It changes the humidity levels for the good inside the colony. And in the summertime, the sun beating through to the roof doesn't transmit the heat down into the colony where they have to spend a lot of energy trying to cool the interior. So insulation's a good idea, both in the cold and in the heat. And I run 2-inch foam insulation, and so does Bob on our hives all year long. That's the first topic I want to talk about. I have one more that I want to catch. Um, the number one thing I see new beekeepers struggle with is lighting a smoker. And even seasoned beekeepers struggle with this. So I'm going to explain how I do it. And maybe there are some tips in that that will help you kind of distinguish things you could change or do better to help you with some of the things that aren't happening for you. So the number one thing for smoker is one, keeping it lit, and two, having it lit for the entire session. If you light it right from the first place, both of those problems get solved. I like to use pine needles. I think it's the best fuel. And in the description, I give you stacking the pine needles in the burn chamber lets it burn for hours if you really want. And it sets you up for next time when you want to use your smoker and have success. So the way to light a smoker is take a little pinch, maybe a cup of pine needles that have been dried out, and I put them in my smoker and I light them with a stick lighter. And I puff it until I see it physically catch fire. And ironically, that amount of needles will probably burn through and become ashes right away. That's okay. You want to physically see the flames from those coming up through the hole in the top of the cover. I grab the next one and I grab maybe double that amount and I just set it in the smoker. I don't push it down in, and I use what's left of my first pinch and I pump the smoker until it starts flames and it catches what I put in on fire. And I wait until I see fire pass through. And then I take my fingers or my eye tool and I push that little bit down and I grab a similar clump and I put it back in. And I stoke, the bellows one more time until I see fire come through all the pine needles. So at this point, the initial one that you put in becomes a bed of coals at the bottom. The second one that you put in is the burning layer. And the one above that is kind of like the insulated part that will be your promissory note for future smoke. As you puff it, you're really getting a lot of flame. When you get to that third pinch and or the next pinch, which you're going to do right after that, you're going to notice the color change in the smoke. The smoke goes from gray, ashen white to almost like a yellow color. It's an incomplete burn. Have you ever seen that yellow? Just give me a wave. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. So that yellow is key. When you pump it, you'll get this yellowish green smoke that's incomplete combustion, but that tells you that you've got enough combustible material underneath your top layer that that's going to continue to burn. At this point, you could take your fist and put it in the smoker and push it down. And even if you pumped it, you would feel no heat on your hand or a minimal amount. You're not going to get burned. Now you can grab a really good handful, like a full cup, and I'm talking about like a baseball sized one. And you're going to squeeze it together into a compact ball and you're going to put it in there. And you're going to squeeze that thing until you see fire come through the first layer. That should be it. When you get to the point where you put the baseball in, you're lit and it's going to stay lit. Now, I don't finish there. A lot of times what I do is continue to grab a little more. I don't know whether you have a short stack smoker, a mid stack smoker, or one of the tall ones like they use in commercial, but I always take enough out of the bag and really push it down in there to the point where I have trouble closing the lid. I go to new beekeepers' houses a lot of times and I watch them light their smoker. They use a cup of needles, and by the time they walk over to the hive, the thing's already burned out and they have no smoke. You have to use a lot of material. Now, it seems wasteful to pack it all the way through. You think you're going to burn through it all? You don't. What I do is I go and work. I have 12 hives at home, and I usually work about half of them at a time. I can work 6 hives and not run out of fuel unless I'm doing something really extensive. And when I'm done, I come back to the house and I take some grass, bundle it up, and put it in the hole. And I lay the smoker down in my grill, my charcoal grill or gas grill, so I don't burn the house down. And I close the lid and I leave it. When you lay it down, if there's flame at the bottom and it's burned like halfway through, it'll want to go up instead of sideways, and it will basically extinguish itself. When you open that smoker the next time that you want to go out to your bees, you pull the lid back and you have it hanging by the hinge. You'll look down. If you were short enough, like did 2 hives, you'll still see unburnt material. You could reach in and pull that out. I set it in a cup and I go down until I get to the burnt part. When I get to the burnt part, I take my hand and I squeeze it all around in there and break it up. And then I turn the smoker over and all of the ash that's burnt will pour out, but there'll still be some remnants of material that's like the equivalent of your first pinch from how you got started. So you light that, then you grab the fuel that you took out that was left over from last time, and you put that in, and that's your first pinch, and you do the flame thing, and then you grab from your bag and you keep putting it in. That's how you light your smoker. Bob and I have worked bees on numerous occasions where you light the smoker. We've gone to Valley Crest where we keep some bees, light the smoker, and put the smoker in Bob's truck and drive back to his house, and then go work the bees at his house with the same smoker that we lit earlier in the day. So if you think through this process and do it a couple times, you'll never be at the point where your smoker doesn't work the way you want it to. There's nothing more frustrating than walking up and trying to smoke the hive and it won't go. Now, sometimes you get impatient and you work too fast. You don't let those embers build up, and you get back to the hive and you go to smoke it and it doesn't work. 50% of the time, if you just stand there like a dolt and talk to yourself about why did I rush this, but you keep pumping the baffle, it will eventually light. There's enough heat down in the bottom with the embers that you can get the thing going, and then just stand there and smoke. And then as you start working the bees, it will work. So if you're somebody that's ever struggled with a smoker, one, make sure you see the flames coming through. Fill it slowly until you see that yellow-gray smoke, and then pack it down and load the thing up, and you'll do really well with your smoker for the rest of your life. You won't struggle with that. Any questions about that? Anybody do that? Anybody use something different? Does anybody use other material other than the pine needles?
Kevin, we've used newspaper to stick in the bottom plus the pine needles
Yeah.
and then go from there.
That's good too. You could use the newspaper to
Or wood
start the initial.
Sometimes we put wood chips in there too.
Some people use wood chips. Some people use.
We use it all. It still
Yeah.
goes out.
I find the wood chips frustrating. They
Oh.
don't burn fast enough.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
probably
get enough smoke out of them for whatever reason. I mean, it depends on, are you talking about like the shavings you'd find in the bottom of a pet container, or the things you get from
No.
Man Lake?
this is like what we'd stick in our smoker grill.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah,
So
because
they're
there's a
big
bunch of
chips,
different
they probably
when
don't-
people say they use wood chips, there's a bunch of different takes on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sounds like pine
Ironically,
needle.
the stuff that comes from wood from Man Lake is terrible, I think. It's terrible. Have you ever tried to light a smoker and keep it lit with that stuff? Even if you get a really good flame, it goes out because it just doesn't burn the way it should. I don't know the secret to that.
All right, well, we have plenty of pine needles, so I think we'll go from there.
Is there supposed to be a hole in the bottom of the smoker?
There is, that's where the air
Didn't know
gets
that.
drawn in through. Yes. It's not connected to the baffle.
Okay.
When I was in Italy, they used burlap and they took cardboard, regular everyday cardboard. They rolled it into a roll like a spiral, and they used a physical, like something you would creme brulee with, torch to light the bottom of it, and they
Yeah.
put it in. And darn if that smoker didn't stay lit the whole time. I don't know what was special about his cardboard, but I tried that and didn't have a lot of luck with it. Whatever it is, one of the most important things is your fuel should be bone dry. You can't go out and collect pine needles underneath a pine tree laying under it. It's too damp. Sometimes what I do is take those pine needles. If I run out and I find myself without them, I'll go collect pine needles from under a pine tree and lay it out in the driveway in the sun for a day. And then collect it all, sweep it all up, and it's dried out enough. So if you ever find yourself short, just lay it out on a patio or something in a thin layer, and the sun will bake it to the point where it dehydrates it to light.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Kevin, is there any type of material that you shouldn't use?
You know, people use different materials, rags and other things that they have. You really want to make sure you know what your stuff's been soaked in, if it
Mhm.
has any chemical traces. And you don't want to use anything that would be obviously bad for the bees to smoke them. And
Right.
there's something that never gets said, which is smoke is not good for you. When you're lighting your smoker, inevitably, it always seems like it always is back in your face. I don't know what the karma is about that, but do your best to try and hold it away from you. And with the wind at your back or something like that, try not to breathe that stuff in, especially pine needles. The pine tar is not good for you to inhale. I don't think people pay enough attention to that. I don't know that you need to be too crazy about that, but the thing that I would say is like somebody offered me a whole bunch of burlap at one point, and I said, "Well, what is this from?" And it was from a factory, and it was laying on the floor with oils and other things.
Hmm.
And because it had petroleum potential contamination, I didn't want to use it.
Yeah.
So anything, Bob, you know we shouldn't use?
No, I think burlap is a good example. You need to know where it comes from because a lot of it's also treated with pesticides, depending on what the product is that it was held in it. But usually if you get burlap from things like coffee, it's usually pretty clean, but you need to make sure.
Yeah, things that come, you know, with food. That's a good point. That's a great way to do it. I know we got them from Dave Waldman's coffee thing at one point and used that. Burlap works pretty good. You have to really get it tucked in tight. I think it burns pretty quickly. Nothing beats pine needles. Sorry. Just
Yeah.
can't. When they have smoker contests to see who can do the longest, almost everybody uses pine needles because it's the best.
Can I ask you about the pine needles that you're using? Because there's lots of different pine and fir and spruce. So are they like relatively longer pine needles, or are they kind of shorter, like
Long,
loose
you're looking
leaves?
for the long ones. The small ones don't seem to burn as well.
Yeah, I've had that
There's usually like
experience.
one little nub with about 3 to 4 pine needles coming out of it. That's the one you want. And they're typically what, 3 to 4 inches long.
Right, yeah, so like a true pine, like a white
Yeah.
pine, something
A
like
white
that.
Right.
pine. Yeah.
White pine, yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
If you're in doubt, go to Bob's house. He has his hive sitting right behind. There's all these pine trees and pine needles all over the ground. It's funny to say this, but I know when I used to drive to work, I could tell you at every place where there was pine trees along the road and a place that you could pull off and collect them. And my neighbor has pine trees in their front yard, and I go and brush them off their driveway for them as a service. And I keep a garbage can full in my house at all times. So
Sure.
I'm going
Yeah.
to open the floor for questions. Anything.
Can you use pine cones?
You can use pine cones, and I've tried that. I tried all kinds of alternatives. The inconsistency with pine cones is when you shove them in there, the space around the pine cone creates a lot of air, and they tend to burn. Like when they get burning, they burn really quickly. The density of the needles when they're packed in allow you to work a lot longer. Another thing, I love to recycle stuff. I'm just kind of silly about that. If you take spent toilet paper tubes, take one, fold it up, put it inside a full one. And I bet if you go look, you probably use so many of them. I took them and just kept stuffing them into one, and then I used that in my smoker. That'll work too. And it recycles that, spent toilet paper tubes. We also take paper towels when we're cleaning up after extracting and wipe up wax and do that. And then you have wax laden paper towels that you could use like the newspaper comment and light that and use that in the bottom. Sometimes it's hard to get that wax to light, and other times it goes up right away. But you could make yourself like fire starters out of wax paper that you use to wipe up errant wax that's melted. So, keep that in mind for someday, maybe. So we started the conversation tonight about weather. Bees are coming in the next week or two. If you're getting bees, it may or may not warm up. I think it's going to get warm enough and be decent for you to install your packages. But whether it's cold or whether it's, comfortable, or whether it becomes hot for some reason, bees are coming. Just kind of have a game plan. If you're bringing a package in and it's cold, you need to take care of that package. You want to keep it in an environment that's comfortable for you. Human comfort temperature is proper for bees, not hot. You don't need to warm them up. Bring them in your house and keep them in your living room until you're ready to install them. Bring your equipment in if it's cold outside and get it to room temperature and install the bees in room temperature equipment. If you have your equipment sitting in your garage and it's cool in there, like mine is, because it's got concrete floors or whatever, and you're going to install that day, take them out and put them in the sun. Get the equipment warm, get the wax warmed up. If you're putting wax foundation out, put that out and get it warmed up. Try and get everything a comfortable temperature for them to put in so they're not on cold substrates. And then keep the bees warm. If it's 60 degrees, you're okay to go. If it's 40 degrees, like it was today, 45 as a high or something like that, and tomorrow it's going to be 70, then hold them for a day. You can hold them for a day, keep them at room temperature, and install them the next day. Just make sure that you follow the instructions that they give you. A lot of people spray their bees with sugar water, room temperature, not cold, to keep them happy and so on while they're in holding. If you go look at our guide, we have a whole thing about how to hold bees. So, questions? Keep going. Anything else?
I have a question about what you were saying about bringing the warm bees in. So we're getting some on Saturday night. So it's nighttime when we receive them. So we don't want to, I think it's supposed to rain on Saturday, so I don't think we would put them out. Can we, if we can just keep them in our garage? Our garage is warm because our heater's in there. So we can just keep them in the garage.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have baby.
Just go out and check on them every once in a while. They'll stay clustered together.
Okay.
How you said it's like room temperature, right? You have it heated.
It's pretty warm in there. I mean, I've never checked the temperature, but I know it's pretty comfortable in there, like to work down there. I have my potting bench and things like that down there, and I don't wear a coat.
Yeah, if you could work in a long sleeve shirt and be comfortable, then you're probably okay, I would think.
Okay.
I would not leave them in an enclosed space where they would some people put them in a box or something like that. They generate enough heat that they can actually cook themselves. So if you're transporting bees, be careful that you give them ventilation.
So should
Right.
should we bring them home that night and put them in the, their box? Or just wait till the next day to
No,
transfer
you
them?
can wait till the next day to install them.
Okay,
But what I'm saying is,
In a mesh bag.
some people would put them in a cardboard box and close the box up and put a heater in with it because
Oh,
they're
wow.
worried about them getting cold. You'll cook them, right? You
No.
don't want to cook your bees.
somebody recommended we get a mesh bag and put it around the
Yeah.
box that they come in.
I just heard somebody say that. So when you go to
Got it.
pick up your bees,
Mhm.
you could buy a mesh bag that you use to transport laundry to a laundromat.
Yeah.
Know that you'll probably see stray bees where you pick them up.
Hmm.
You could take the package and put it inside that and cinch it closed and then put it in your car. Just look for any errant bees that, are on the ground that become stragglers because they'll be flying with you inside the car. But that's a great way to keep them from going crazy inside your car while you're driving them home.
Size frames,
Okay.
I think we'll get them on.
So we were going to put them install them into a deep box. Is
Right.
that- yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
Okay.
you would follow the instructions that we gave, which is you pull the center frames out and
Mhm.
you would dump them in. Have you ever done it?
Well, we did it one time 2 years ago. And
Somebody.
with
So
somebody.
you know what I mean by dumping then.
Flying solo this time.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I'll say, just for, you may or may not know this, meaning the general, everybody. There's two general methods of installing a package. One of them is you pull the can out, get the queen out, and you turn the actual package upside down, and you physically dump the bees through the hole into the box. That's the method we recommend. It's called the dump method. The second way is you take the frames out of the box and you put your package inside a hive box and you give them some comb on another box above them and you let the bees quote unquote walk out, and they don't. There are times when they'll stay right in the package even though they have a hive interior with, it's barren to them, they've never been in there, nobody's walked on it and did whatever. We've come back days later after trying this install method and they're still down in the package. And you
Okay,
end
so
up dumping them out anyway. People don't like to dump the bees because you're physically dumping them out and you're banging them around and doing all that. And they think it's cruel. The fact of the matter is they got dumped into the package to get there in the first place. Beekeepers pulled them out of a hive and dumped them through a funnel to get them into the box. It's not going to harm them. They're extremely durable. And so
Okay.
the fastest way to get them into the hive interior is dump them.
just turn it upside down, dump them.
Turn it upside down, shake it, and then take the box, flip it over. This is going to sound really weird. Tap it on the ground so all the bees come off the screen and come down to the floor. Tilt it to one side with force, and then flip it over and hard shake down and bang them out.
Okay.
And just keep tilting it back and forth because the bees hit the wood. They don't come out of the hole unless they actually are hitting the hole. And so sometimes you have to move them a little to get them over to the hole so that they come down.
Okay.
After you dump them in, you can gently take the frames and nestle them back in over top of the clump of bees. They'll move out of the way if you give them time and give a little pressure. And then you take the package with errant bees in it and you set it in front of the hive and they will smell their nestmates and come out and exit the package in the cold of the night, cold of the day, and go into the hive with the rest of their nestmates.
Okay. So this is all done outside.
Done outside. We have a video that shows how to do it. I'll get you a link in the,
Okay.
if you go to the managed mentoring lesson for package install, there's a link to the video right there. And
Okay.
it shows you how to do it.
I just want to clarify. So you take the queen out first?
You
Or
take
she's-
the queen
yeah.
out. Yes. So you
So
pop
when-
the, it depends on the package that they give you. There's different kinds. The traditional package, there's a wooden shim that sits over the can. It's stapled. Take your hive tool and you pop that off. And then you use your fingers and you grab the edge of the can. Sometimes this is a easier said than done thing. And you slide the can up. And eventually the can, the feeder can comes free. And you'll see the queen. She's stapled. A lot of times they take a plastic strip and staple it. And she's hanging in there. Before you pop the staples off the plastic strip, grab the strip. Because if you grab the staples off, she might go down in there and guess where your hand has to go? Down
Oh,
inside the package to get her.
I gotta
So
find her.
hold the strip and pop the staples off and then bring her out. If there's bees on that package, you could flick them off with your finger. Look to see if the queen is okay. You'll see her in there with her attendants. And then you're going to take her and put her right in your pocket. For
Oh my
safekeeping.
God.
Okay. And
Okay.
then you're going to do what we talked about, which is do the dump. If you watch the video, it's all explained. And then
Okay.
in that actual lesson, there's a written guide. It explains a lot of detail about the whole process. And then it gives you, at the end of it, a checklist. Do this, do this, do this. And it tells you all the things like, here's what you should bring out. Here's how you set up to do the actual task. Here's the actual step-by-step task. Here's what you do afterwards and so on. So we've done this so many times that we built a very detailed instruction set for you to follow. And then there's a video of me installing a package
Okay.
that you could watch. And most people, after they read the guide and watch the video, they go and do it. And it's like, yeah, this was no big deal.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully,
Thank you.
bring that to your experience.
Stay tuned. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, you can tell us when you come back because you'll tell us what went right, what went wrong, right? There's always a little something. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bob, are we doing package installs this year? I think we were, right?
No, we, the apiary is full.
Oh,
We-
okay.
We had, 3 out of 4 that made it through the winter, and then, Gene and
Gene brought him up. Okay.
2 more up there, so the apiary is full. So no, there'll be no package installs this year.
Sometimes we do package installs in our apiary and you can come and watch us do an actual package install and then go home and put yours in. So where are you getting your bees from?
I ordered them through the Beekeepers Association, the Raritan Valley Beekeepers.
Barron Valley. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised and stay on top of it if there's a delay. Sometimes when weather doesn't cooperate, they call last minute and say, hold on, there's been a change of plans. And you need to be extremely flexible. You think you're getting them on Saturday and they show up on Tuesday.
Oh, all right. Because
You
we're
should
supposed
be
Saturday.
very aware that
Saturday night, 7:15 is supposed to be the day, the time.
it's supposed to be the day, but like you said, maybe they're coming up through Georgia and there's a storm in Virginia and they get called by Georgia saying come a day later so you can avoid that kind of thing.
So,
Okay.
Gene, it sounds
Very
like
common.
those are gonna be nukes then, right? From Grant?
Yeah.
So they're not packages, Kevin, they're
Oh, well,
nukes.
then you're not doing a package.
Okay.
All that we just told you is a good dry run, but you're going to actually install it differently.
Okay.
So when you bring your nuke home, good catch, Bob. I didn't know whether they were doing packages at Raritan Valley. I haven't heard, but you were at the meeting. Okay, let's do a nuke. You're bringing your nuke home, which is a hive in miniature. It's 5 frames. It's got a fully working colony in miniature. You're going to bring your box home. You're not going to put that in your garage. You're going to put it right out on top of the box, setting on your hive stand on its roof. And you're going to let it sit there for a day or two until you see the bees flying. After you see the bees are established and they're flying, you're going to then pick that box up and set it down on the ground. Take the 5 frames out of the middle of your hive and systematically, one by one, transfer the nuke into the middle of your hive box. and put the roof on and be done.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds a lot simpler.
That's
Lot less-
easier. Yeah. One thing that I'll tell you is we recommend that you put an inner feeder inside the colony. Do you have one of those?
I don't.
In the instructions, one of the better things to do is to put a internal feeder in position 10. If you're going to work the hive, you're right-handed,
Yes.
you're going to work the hive from the left side in the back. And
Okay.
so you want the feeder to be far away from the side that you would typically enter, which would be your left side from the back.
Okay.
The reason you put the internal feeder in is on the cold nights that we're having. If you used a different feeder, the liquid would chill, but when it's in with the bees, it stays warm. And when you want to feed the bees and they're in one box, you just smoke the entrance, take the roof off, and just slide the inner cover over till that feeder is exposed, and you could pour the liquid in and then slide the cover back over, and you don't have to open the hive.
Oh, wow. So where would I get a feeder?
You buy them from Man Lake or any place, order them online. Make sure you get one that has, they all have them nowadays. The internal tube that goes down through should have some sort of lattice work for the bees to walk. Originally, they didn't have that and the bees drowned.
Oh, God. Okay.
And when you're ready to go, you should fill that feeder and then put your bees in. So when you close them up, it's already full.
Okay.
We have a
Okay.
We have a frame top feeder is all we have. That's different though.
If the weather happens to break and it's warm enough every day that you can put feed in the top and that liquid is not going to cool so much that they won't drink it down, then you could use the top feeder. But that's usually later, like May, June timeframe.
Okay.
Think about it. If you put cold liquid, even a quart, and they didn't drink it all last night, by the time they got up this morning, it would be 20 degrees. It
Yeah,
would
right.
be 29 degrees and it wouldn't be something that they could drink. And I
Okay.
don't know if there's enough heat during the day today to heat that to the point where they could take it down. But if you had a feeder inside the hive next to the bees, the heat that they generate inside would keep it warm enough that they would be able to take it through.
I order a couple.
So this time of year, it's an internal feeder option.
Okay.
So Kevin, can I follow up on one thing you said with the nuke install?
Yeah.
You mentioned that when you bring it home, you put it on top of the box and just let it sit for a few days until the bees are flying.
Yeah.
How are the bees flying? I mean, I'm assuming that the nuke box is closed when you get it, right? I mean, it's sealed up. I mean,
It'll be closed in transport, but when you get home, you can open it. They'll orient and they'll start to fly and they'll go out and find pollen and they'll get established.
And when you say open it, is it similar to like a regular hive where there's like a door at the bottom or something for them to come in and out of, or?
Yeah, every package or every nuke that you buy comes from a manufacturer with however they deem to close it. Some of them just put a solid bar
Okay.
across the front and they have one of those dial things that lets
Okay.
air get through. Do you know what I mean? They
Yeah.
drill a hole in the front and they put the
Yep.
disc on.
Okay.
Some of them give you a small, very similar to a mouse guard,
Uh-huh.
but it's nuke size
Okay.
and it has a hole in it, but
Okay.
they tape the hole off or close the hole off in some manner.
For
In
transport.
that case,
Okay.
you would just dislodge whatever's blocking the hole and let them fly.
Got it. Got it.
But the reason you take them and put them on the roof of your hive is one, they'll orient to the spot and then they'll get used to where they are. And
Uh-huh.
then when you transfer them into your hive equipment, they'll adapt it really quickly because they know where they are. They've already anchored to that spot.
Got it. Yep. Makes sense.
So Kevin, if they're buying them from Grant this year, from Grant Styles, I believe he's using chloroplast nukes this year. So
Oh,
there-
is
yeah, so there's a little door in the front that will be closed that you'll have to open, and they can show you how to do that when you pick them up.
if in doubt, always ask your provider, right?
Sure.
That's their job to make sure that you know and don't have any questions.
Yep.
we're happy to help, but they're the ones that are physically giving you the equipment so they know the best instructions.
Mhm.
So
But-
Coroplast, by the way, is the stuff that real estate signs are made out of.
Oh.
If
Oh.
you weren't
Oh, right.
familiar with
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the plastic is.
Mhm.
Typically, Grant sells his stuff in wooden equipment, so that's a change for him.
I have a follow-up question. I have a fuzzy recollection from the provider for us that they're giving us frames, but they told us we needed to bring our own box. Does that sound
Yeah.
right to you? Can you
So,
maybe describe what that's
Anybody
about?
that you buy from has different engagements. They're entitled to do that. Some of them give you a box, you bring the box and install in your equipment, and then you bring the box back to them. Some of them, you bring your equipment and they open a hive in the yard and physically pull the frames out and load it into your equipment, and you take your equipment home with their bees and frames. Everybody does it a little bit differently. It's more customary to what Anthony was saying is that you pick up a temporary nuke and bring that home. And the reason they use these Coroplast things are it's built into the cost and they don't want them back. But in your case, Kyle, it sounds like you're going to bring your hive equipment in. Are you buying a nuke or a
Yes.
full-size colony?
We're buying a nuke. Says it has
Okay.
4 frames. What I'm unclear about, and I can ask them, but what I'm unclear is, do I bring a deep or do I bring a different size box?
99% of the time when you buy a nuke, you're buying a deep.
Okay.
Typically, if you want to you run mediums and start beekeeping, you have to ask them, do you sell medium nukes so that you can make sure that the frames are right? But in the end, it's important for you to call and ask. There's
Sure.
no dumb questions for this kind of stuff.
Got it.
Where
Thank
do you know, I've been in the situation you're talking about where you go and you bring your equipment and use it a lot for time, and also know that I don't know how this works. Sometimes they line up 5 or 6 people and you'll be standing there waiting for number 5 to be done because you're number 6 and 4 held up 5 and 3 had no clue what they were doing. So you should make sure that you allot a lot of time and go with the ebb and flow of whatever's going on. Now, sometimes when you go and pick up, you're the appointment for the day. They transfer into your stuff and, it's just all about you. And other times it becomes a bit of a, it's like going to DMV.
And
I don't
with
know
this
how-
style, would we use the mesh bag trick as well to keep it contained for the transport?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Especially since you're transferring bees in, it is highly likely that you'll have bees on the exterior of your stuff, even if you tape it closed.
Right.
Yeah. And for those of you that are going to pick up nukes, make sure you understand transport. Like ideally, they'd be in the vehicle with you. Don't ride in the back of a pickup truck with the wind blowing on them. You
Mhm.
could harm them. Don't lock them in a trunk where it's hot and they could cook. It doesn't seem likely in the next couple of weeks, but we've had times when, well, it was 80 degrees like 3 or 4 days ago, right?
Yeah.
If you went and picked up bees on an 80-degree day like it was that day and you put them in a trunk and you picked them up in Man Lake out in Pennsylvania and you drove home to New Jersey, you stand a chance that you could cook those bees by the time you get home. So just use common sense about, if it's hot, stop, open the trunk, let them have some fresh air or whatever on your transport and, think it through.
If you are bringing home either in your equipment or a nuke box, could you cover it if it's in your car with a sheet, or is that too heavy?
No, I think a sheet would be okay. One of the things you don't want to do is some people go buy 5 nukes and they stack all 5 like physically tight against each other inside of a hive. The middle one will cook because the heat transfer from the other ones. But if you have them loosely covered with a sheet and there's air around them, I think you'll be fine. I don't know, Bob, weigh in if you have any other ideas there.
No, the important thing is To Kyle's point, if you're putting them in your box, you have to have a way to close off the entrance. And then the bag is a good idea, the laundry bag over the top.
Blue tape is your friend.
Blue
You know what I
tape?
mean? The blue tape, painter's tape.
Mhm.
You can close pretty much anything you need to close with blue tape. So bring a roll with you. And if you need to tape off the entrance, you can do that.
So what are we putting in the beef feeders?
This time of year, you're going to feed sugar and water, 1-to-1 mix,
1-to-1?
1-to-1, 1 part sugar, 1 part water.
Thank you.
Wait, sorry. Question about the one-to-one part. So I have bought for the first time, I don't want to make my own solution, sugar solution. So I bought a bucket.
Mhm.
You're mentioning a 1-to-1. I was told 3/4-to-1.
Or if Tractor Supply or somebody like that has one.
Yeah, so let's just talk about general rule of thumb.
Okay.
When a bee goes out in the spring and is bringing in nectar, the concentration of nectar
What are
and
those?
sugar, the liquid, is somewhere between 20 and 25%. 22% is the number that's often used. When you're trying to feed bees and give them carbohydrate and so on, typically 1-to-1 gives them a ratio similar to that, where in contrast, in the fall, it's 2-to-1, 2 part sugar to 1 part water, which is a higher concentration of sugar. And they typically see that as something they would convert for storage. Now, it's become a trend over the last like 3 to 4 years for people to be talking about all these ratios, not just 1-to-1, which was the simple thing to say.
Okay.
People are mixing 3-to-2 and 7-to-4, and I don't know what started all this. It started with like down south, Bob Binney and those folks talking about different ratios and what they found, why the bees took it and stuff. For simplification, I'm just going to tell you, for 50 years, the mentor that I worked with always said 1-to-1, and it's never done me wrong. So
Okay.
don't make it complicated. 1 part sugar, 1 part water, by weight or volume, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
That's the easy way to go. And by the way, if it's 1 part sugar to 1.2% water, it doesn't matter. They're still going to suck it down. So you don't have to get too fussy. Like, you shouldn't get a slide rule out for this. So what you bought is perfectly fine, G.
Do you recommend or suggest any additives like was it HBH, Happy, whatever, or Hive Alive to add to the 1-to-1 sugar?
There's a lot of coddling that people want to do with their bees, and there's a lot of marketing out there for the benefits of Honeybee Healthy and adding. Some people love to mix tea. They brew tea and put it in. Honestly, bees get sugar water from plants, and that's all they get. The one thing about Honeybee Healthy and some of those things is that they often add odor to whatever the food is. And from that perspective, it might be a little more attractive. There might be trace minerals and vitamins and so on. But in the major spring nectar flow, they're getting everything they need from a nutrition and mineral trace minerals and all that from the pollen and the thing that it's really just going above and beyond. I won't tell you not to do it. If you do it though, make sure you follow the instructions for Honeybee Healthy. Add the concentration that they tell you. More is not better in that context. But I'm not adverse to it. I know people who say that stuff is just amazing. Honestly, I tried it, but I don't use it. I would
Kevin,
be very careful though, one last thing on that, of listening to John Q. Public on YouTube telling you about some magic elixir, especially when it comes to essential oils. There's certain essential oils that people think are great for bees and are actually poisonous to bees in specific concentrations. So don't be a mad scientist trying to mix up the magic potion, because you may actually do more harm than good. If you're going to add something, go the route that you're talking about, which is buy the commercial product, Honeybee Healthy, and use that kind of stuff. Don't go off the reservation.
No, actually, the person who, the beekeeper, or the person I bought it from, he said actually use half of what it says. You don't need to use even, it's recommended, more dilute. So
Yeah,
it's curious.
yeah. I think in time you figure out that you don't really see any reason, like it's hard to quantitatively say this is better for the bees. And it gets to the point where like, I'm not going to do this because it's work. You know, there has been anecdotal stories about colonies that were not doing well, and they physically just take Honeybee Healthy and pour it over the hive, and it makes a miraculous recovery. Is it the Honeybee Healthy, or is it the grooming, or is it the stop of, who knows? They can't really tell, but it did, folklore says that the stuff is magic. So I
And
would
you
never
can't-
poo-poo it, but I wouldn't say go out of your way for it.
And you can't eat.
Kevin, for year two hives coming out of winter, do I have to feed them, or how do I know if I have to feed them?
Yeah, typically you don't have to feed them. So you're going to come out of winter with a colony that is usually middle of the road. If it's not middle of the road, it's strong and banging. That's typical. Middle of the road means 3, 4, 5 frames. They already have brood going. You'll pull out frames and see capped brood. You're going to start to see drones, and they're on their way to the population base that they need to swarm. Unless you want to make a split and grow your operation, don't feed the bees if they're in that state, because they're perfectly fine and suitable. Feeding them stimulates them to grow even bigger. So if you have a really big colony coming out of winter, or a regular run-of-the-mill medium colony, you don't need to feed them. And if you went into winter with 60 to 80 pounds, they probably have more than enough reserves on their flanks that they certainly don't need more food. And it's better for them to go get whatever's in nectar and start that situation. The only time I would say to you feeding makes sense is if you come out of winter with a 2-frame nuke in a 20-frame box. I have one of those. I had 1 frame, I call it a dink, or 1 hive. The colony is 3 frames of bees, and that's it. And they're not 3 full frames, like both sides covered. There's bees on those frames, but it's nothing to write home about. I took that 20-frame box, 2 deeps. I pulled it apart this week because I knew cold weather was coming, and I moved it into a nucleus box. I put honey on both sides, and I put those bees in the middle, and it happens to be an insulated nuke. I run polystyrene nukes, so that they would be able to maintain space in something that's right sized for their population. That colony I would feed. That's the colony I would feed to try and build them up. They're trying to get to mid-state coming out of winter. But other ones, unless you're trying to grow your operation, there's no need to feed in the spring.
I have 3 questions. Whenever you're going to.
Go ahead. We're doing open question tonight. We're
Okay,
not going to do
great.
anything.
Okay, question number 1. So I have used frames. I can actually show you a little bit how they look. So obviously, I'm getting my nuke this Saturday, and the question is, I have also brand new frames. Should I use the brand new frames first, and basically don't have them, take the energy to clean the old ones? Or should I use a new, or should I use the old? Let me show you what I have for the old.
Mhm.
Let's see. So, yeah, here's an example. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal. It has some residence of different things, but yeah, so pretty much
Yeah.
all of them are like that.
Okay. My sense is if they're like that, they're perfectly fine, and I would guide you, and Bob, you feel free to weigh in, to use the ones that have comb on them. You want to put that nuke in and give them
Mhm.
comb so that they could get a fast start. And
But
when the
that none of
queen
them really
starts
have a
laying,
comb, right? I mean, they have like something slightly built in, but yeah, I mean,
even the vestiges of what I could see there is a head
uh-huh.
start
So
versus
this
a
is better than
brand new.
nothing, right? So this
Yes,
is better
yeah,
than, okay, so then I'll use those. Okay, great, thank you. That was one of my questions.
yeah.
Two, I'm putting them on a part of my end of my property. Unfortunately, it's dark now, and maybe what next time I'll take a screenshot of it so I can share it on the call. But so it's going to be in the back of my property, and it's going to be kind of on a hill. I wanted to make sure that I am positioned them properly. And so my question is, you know, right now it's sloping, so should I completely level it? What is the basic, I guess, premises around, you know, having I know there has to be a slight sloping towards, you know, the entrance.
Mhm.
But, you know, what is the slight, you know, and what is the, I guess, what was the role of the thumb?
Let me just go back and ask one quick question. We saw
Yeah.
one frame there. Any of those frames, they were in a box that was operational. Do they have old vestiges of brood, meaning bees that didn't emerge or whatever? You know what I mean by
Yeah,
that?
so all of them look the way that I showed you. I have some medium. So yeah, this is a used equipment from somebody that had lots of bees, and he's just basically you know, transitioned out of bees altogether. I have medium, let me show medium ones. Let me see if I can find them that had some of the comb on it, but they're medium. That one.
Okay, but you're going to put them in it deep, so I think you're
Where
okay. What I was going to get
did
at,
I
and this
see
is what I
it?
wanted to point
And what
out,
I needed, I can find it. Yeah.
if you're going to install
Yeah,
bees
see?
on,
So those are
yeah,
awesome,
those look
but it's a
fun.
medium.
Yeah. If you had bees that had previous brood nest in them and there
Yeah.
were vestiges of old brood, those would be the only things that I would hesitate to use, depending
Okay.
on what shape they are. But you don't have that. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't
Yeah.
not clear that. And I think you're fine. That stuff is all,
Yeah, I think he cleaned it for me.
it looks that way.
Okay. Yeah, he said he power washed, but I don't know what he power washed. I'm assuming not the frames. They look okay to me. Did they look okay to you? I mean, I have no clue, but I
He
shouldn't say
power
that.
washed the small ones. He didn't power wash those. It was
The medium ones? No, because they have a
No,
comb
I'm
in it,
sorry,
so
the
I'm
other way.
assuming he probably didn't.
He power washed the big ones, but he left the mediums the way they are.
Yeah, this is like amazing. Like I wish I had the big ones like that. Looks clean and beautiful, ready for my bees. Okay.
That'll mean you get honey quickly.
No, but I can't put the mediums yet. Um,
Yeah, in time
I'm
you'll get
starting with
there
one
at least.
D bucks, but eventually it will help. So
So,
question
so on your question about if you're
sloping.
setting up an apiary and you're trying to set your hives out and you're prepping your space, I would suggest that you ensure that at least the hive stand is level.
Yeah.
And then when you put your hive on it, hive equipment, you want it to be level from side to side, and you want it to have a slight tilt forward. Now,
Okay. Nice.
Bob,
Yeah.
who's in the call, we just went through his apiary and
Uh-huh.
we set up 5 pads. I'll call them pads where we set them up. And we took a shovel and we leveled the ground underneath where each of the hives are going to be.
Yeah.
We built a slight tilt forward so that when he puts his hive stands on, the
Mm-hmm.
hives are level side to side and they just lean forward. You don't want, so when the rain lands on the landing board,
You
if
don't want it to
it
go
was
in.
tilted
Yeah.
back, it would roll in. And if it was flat level, it would lay
Yeah.
on the front entrance and you actually want it lean forward just a little so it runs off.
Okay. All right.
What would
So
be a good angle? 1 degree?
1 to 2 degrees,
Okay, so
nothing,
that's really
you don't
little,
want to
okay.
be,
Hmm.
you don't want to be a slope, Jack. I think just 1 to 2 degrees, just enough to give it just a tight, slight little lean.
And then,
Well,
by the way,
how-
while we at the garage again, so this is, I have two. One of them is already on my property, ready to, be occupied on Saturday. But this is what I have, two of those. So I have, it's on the cinder box. So this one doesn't have a cinder box because it's not out there, but I'm going to have cinder blocks on the bottom. Then there's, looks like two boards. And then you have the entrance and the deep box, and then obviously you have this and the
Roof,
cover.
yep.
Where's my cover? And then I have a cover. So, so it's be my setup. Obviously aligned, with the cinder blocks underneath of it. So just one deep box.
Yep, to start with. So
Okay,
the one
right.
that, first off, that's blurry and hard for us to see, but I think I
Oh.
can recognize what you have. It's an unconventional bottom board. It's always blurry when you show the hive. I don't know why.
Oh,
Is it
Remove your
blurry from-
background blur. You have to, so when it doesn't recognize a face, it blurs your background. So if you can take off your
okay.
background effect, we'll be able to see it clearly.
Let me move pieces around. So this is the bottom board.
No,
And
Annette,
then-
we're not able to see it until you can remove the background.
Oh, let me
effect.
see. if I can
Only your
change my-
face is clear.
Crap, how did I change this? I'm sorry. What did you say? I can change this?
So it should be a button that says background effects, and then there, remove blur.
Good call, Vanessa.
Yeah. Okay. So what are we doing that? Okay. It's not coming up now to me.
But the general
it up.
principle, you're going to send it on
Yeah.
a cinder block. You're going to have
Yeah.
a bottom board, a single deep, a inner cover, and a roof is standard fare. No issues.
So last question that I have is around the day that I'm going to bring my bees in. It's going to be 40 something degrees. I'm going to be picking it up after 5 p.m. So around 6 p.m. in New Jersey on Saturday, it's going to supposed to rain. So it's going to be at
Yeah.
least drizzling. Not an ideal day to move anything from one place to another. So the question is, obviously, I'm going to have everything preset. So I'm just opening everything, putting the bees, in and closing them. Should I also try to insulate them in any way, or, so then they're warmer?
If you're installing a nuke into that equipment, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
5 frames
Okay.
of bees, 4 frames of bees, depending on what you're getting.
I think they said 5.
But this is the thought. I'm betting, think of
Mhm.
it this way. When you go pick them up, they're going to be sitting out in a field. When you bring them home and put them in your equipment, they're sitting out in the field. So from that perspective, common
used
sense
to
would
it.
dictate they're fine.
Okay.
They're already outside.
I just
Yeah.
leave them sit for a day or two in
Yeah,
the nuke.
in the nuke itself, right? That's what I
Yes.
was saying before is bring them home. Don't put them in the equipment right away. Set the equipment, your equipment, to be clear. Set your block out, set your bottom board, your hive box with the
Yep, yep.
frames, inner covered roof, set it up on a stand. Then take the nuke box that you bring home and physically just set it right on the roof of your
Okay.
hive. Open it up and leave it there for a couple days. 2 days is all you need. And then,
And how about wind? We've been having a lot of wind and everything. So should I put something over?
yeah, I would,
the box?
everybody hear this. When you bring your nuke home, make sure the entrance is closed, like to the smallest opening. Don't leave it wide open.
You talk, okay, so to the nuke, right?
The nuke, do not
Okay.
leave it wide open. Leave the mouse guard in with the small notch. That
Yeah.
way, if it is windy, to your point, they could still protect themselves. And again, you probably picked them up in the field and that's the way you were going to find them when you got them. But the key here is bees will come out, they'll look at the sun, they'll look at the hive, they'll look at the landscape, they'll orient to the spot. And within a day or two, they'll actually go out further and start bringing in pollen. And they'll start building brood inside your nuke box. When they bring in pollen, They are anchored to that spot. They're not leaving.
Okay.
And at that time, whether you leave them in the nuke box and operate them as a nuke, or do what you want, which is transfer the nuke into your hive equipment and close the roof and get rid of the nuke equipment, they will stay to that spot because once they start doing pollen, they're operational.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the equipment the nuke is coming with, right? Just if it's flimsy, plastic thing, I'm just thinking it's not going to be isolated properly. So
Yeah.
that's my idea. They are coming from a, wooden beehive, so I was thinking maybe putting it into my equipment, but I will, I'll go with the flow and figure it out the day off.
That's not a bad plan. I'm looking at the weather for next week, at least in our area. It's going to be cold and damp, 45 on Saturday. Warms up better to comfortable weather-ish. Normal high, 55. It's 57. And then on Monday, Tuesday, it's 66 degrees for a high both of those days. So if
Right.
you're bringing a nuke home this weekend, by Tuesday, you should be in business. It'll be so comfortable. You could do whatever you want for them.
Okay, great.
Then it turns a little colder again for a couple days. It looks like it'll be in the
I know, it's a
50s,
roller
low
coaster here in New
50s.
Jersey.
Good old roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I just thought of it. So I'm going to have another one because I'm getting them from two different places. Probably beginning of May, I'm going to get another one. It's going to be winterized. With something that I'm spending extra money on. So how far the beehive is supposed to be apart? I'm assuming 4 to 6 feet, and since they are not used to each other, what are the, do and don'ts?
You could physically take two hives from two different properties, completely different colonies, and set them right next to each other, inches apart, and they will do fine. In your case, if you're
Inches?
going to have them 4 to 6 feet apart, that's even better.
Okay.
The
So-
research tells us that the hives do better when they're spread further apart. So if you have the opportunity to keep your hives spread apart from each other on your property, that's actually ideal, but it's not a requirement. Some people physically set up a rail with 2 fence posts set on cinder blocks, and they set all their hives on the rail. In your case, it sounds like you're setting them on cinder blocks. I would just keep them apart. One of the things that we recommend in the lesson is it would sure be nice to be able to run a mower between 2 hives.
Yeah, that's the
when you
idea.
need to.
Yeah,
So
yes,
spread them
yes.
apart.
Mhm.
Think about that. Spread them
Right.
apart so that you can get
Yeah,
a mower.
that's the idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sounds like you're in a good place.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the question I had.
Yeah, sure. Jack, did you have a question?
Yes, when I pick up my nuke that I ordered, I use a pickup truck. And my question is, as far as the opening on the nuke, I thought I put a screen over that, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And
You have a cap on that or a tonneau cover?
No,
or is it
no, I
just
don't.
open?
yes. And I have to go about, 20 miles. It's relatively close, not a long trip.
You want to offer any guidance, pickup truck owner Bob? On that one?
Again, just try to keep them out of the wind as much as possible. I guess, how many nukes are you bringing, Jack? 1 or 2?
Just one,
Just one?
yes.
I guess it's just personal preference. I would put it inside the cab with me.
Well, I guess I could. But you'd never want to close that opening off with tape, would it? They'd suffocate, wouldn't they?
No, so I agree with you, Jack. If you could, again, put screen over it, right, so the bees can't get out, I would bring it in the cab with me. Could you put it in the back of the pickup truck? Sure you can. Yes.
If you're putting it in the back of the pickup, what I would recommend is you put it up against the cab,
Yeah.
not by
Yeah.
the tailgate. Because the air
Yeah.
blowing over the cab goes down, hits the edge of the tailgate if it's open, and it circulates in there, and that creates like a vortex. but you probably know if you put stuff in the front, you could throw a styrofoam coffee cup up in the front of a pickup truck bed and it doesn't move around. So I would
Yeah.
tuck it up against the front to try and prevent air circulation from it, and you'd probably be okay with that trip.
The way I set up the location for the hive, I took it's sloped. I bought a stainless steel non-adjustable stand that has a pad on the bottom of each of the 4 legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I made 4 holes for those legs to level it and tamped those holes on the bottom. And so then closed them up and put wood chips in all around the area so I could get up to the wood chips and mow around them. That's the
Okay.
way I set it up.
Yeah, I understand that. Is that the one that's adjustable where it has the thumbnails
No.
screws that let you adjust the width?
No, it's non-adjustable.
Good. That thing is a piece of garbage. The one that I'm talking about. It's really
Oh.
lightweight. I have 2 of them. They're the worst hive stands. If you've ever seen those in the catalog, they're awful. They bend when they put a hive on. Even a nucleus
gee.
colony doesn't do well. So don't buy those, folks. If you see what I'm talking about, they use thumb screws. You could adjust it narrow for a nuke or wide for a full size colony, and they're not very good.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm happy to keep answering questions, no problem. If you're done with questions and you don't want to listen to other questions, you're free to go. I don't want to hold you here, but I think just listening to other people ask questions, you always learn something from that perspective. So I'm not chasing you away, but respectful of time tonight, I'll stay as long as people have questions. Just checking how we're doing. Any other questions, folks?
Well,
I have a few, but I'll let
uh,
anyone first year go first. I'm just holding on.
I have a quick
Okay.
question. You mentioned that you insulate all year long. Did you mean just the top cover that you keep an insulation on, or do you actually around the
Yeah,
side
top.
in the summer? Okay, thank you.
Yep, 2-inch foam, the exact same dimension, length and width of inner cover, sitting over the inner cover.
Yeah, I'm planning on using wool, raw wool from sheep.
Yeah, there are people who create like quilt boxes and things like that. I don't think it's the same thing because the air can pass through that, but it is possible to do, some sort of quilt cover is what you're talking about.
Now
It's
this
pretty
is as it's sheared off the sheep.
okay. You're gonna put it in a box up top?
No, just under the top cover.
Oh, so you're
Loose
gonna
wool.
set it over. Yeah, okay. Let me know how that goes. That'd be interesting to see how that. It would do the same thing. I just wonder what the bees would do to it.
We'll see.
The one thing that I would say, Jack, it concerns me is that would be a haven for hive beetles.
Oh,
So later this year, hive beetles would use that to hide and nest in. So if you start to see an abundance of hive beetles, do you know what they are?
yeah, I do know what they are. Well, my first thought was be ideal in the winter time, I'm thinking, but as far as the summer, I hadn't considered that possibility.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it would. Most people build what I called a quilt box. They make a small box. It's almost like a shrunken outer cover, the dimension of the hive box, and they set it on top and they put the materials in it and then they cover it off. And it creates a space above the hive with insulated materials that the air collects, and it's a buffer so that warm air collects or cold air doesn't get through. And they call that a quilt box. If you look it up, you'll find different examples out there.
Okay.
And, it is a true technique, Jack, to do that, but to leave it free form, that would be an interesting experiment to see with the bees. A lot of time the bees wouldn't like that. They would tear it all apart and take it out.
Oh,
I would think they'd see
Yeah.
it. It's like, this is weird. I don't want this. And they'd tear it all out and carry it out the front of the hive. So do look for it, like out the front of the hive, they would discard it.
Yeah,
Kevin, what kind of foam do you use?
XPS, X-ray Papa Sam, XPS foam.
XPS foam. Okay.
What's the R value on that?
Like R20,
Hmm.
I think. It's pretty high.
For 2 inches. The only,
Bob
one-
uses 1 inch, right?
I use 1 inch, yeah, and that's R5. The expanded foam that we're talking about, Pauline and others, the bees will chew it. Okay, so sometimes you might want to buy some that's faced or put a piece of Reflectex, which is again another kind of an insulation that's got a face on it, but they will chew the foam over time.
Yeah, someone told me either aluminum foil, cover it with aluminum foil or paint it.
Yes, good idea. Aluminum foil would be great.
And that's inside between the outer cover and the inner cover?
Yes, so I cut it so that it's nice and snug on the outer cover and it fits where you push it in there and it fits right in. And I
Okay.
leave it in there year round, summer, because it keeps the hive cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter.
But
Do you
with,
put it on yours, Bob, or do you paint it? Do you do
No,
either
I
of them?
just I put it in there and when they chew it up, I put a new
Chew it
piece in every couple of years.
Okay.
so the inside cover that has the, like the hole in the middle, the
Yes,
bees can't come through there then, correct? Or they
that's
do?
right. They can't,
Okay,
but they don't anyway when that's up against the outer cover either, right?
okay.
It's sitting there. They're not going up through that hole. There's nowhere for them to really go.
I wasn't sure if there, because there's a little bit of shim around the inner cover, that there's a little bit of bee space that they do go.
Yeah, no, not really.
No.
So,
Okay.
no, but it's not a problem.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Again, just cut it a little bit bigger and just snug it in there and it'll fit right in. It'll become part of your outer cover.
Got it. Thank you.
And had
This
a
is
quick
a
question.
illustration of a hive insulation. You can see this?
Yep.
Okay, you see this foam sitting over the inner cover and then it's transparent so that you could see it, but it sits under telescoping cover.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 2 inch foam and you leave this here all year long. Now this is one that goes to the side, to the back, and there it's transparent here, but to the front where you wrap it around, this is the one that I was saying, if you still have it on, leave it on until the temperature breaks. But this piece of foam is the one we're talking about.
Okay.
And you could see this is what a fully insulated hive looks like.
And technically you could leave it all summer if you don't mind taking it off and on, because it would insulate from the heat as well.
Yes, but I mean, most people,
No.
it's overkill. The other thing that you could use is these hive wraps. Some people staple, please don't do that. Tar paper, or you could buy this device, which slides down over it like a blanket, like a sleeping blanket for hives. Or you could do what I do, which is use insulated hives. You notice in this photo here, why is there so much snow up there? Because the hive is insulated and the heat didn't go through and melt the snow. We had hives that one had insulation and it looked just like this, and one didn't, and the snow was melted to 2 inches instead of 4 or 6. So it clearly works. And then there was a question about quilt boxes. This is what a quilt box looks like. Hold on, let me get to it. This. You see they're up here and they have a little notch. This one has a feeder box, but you could put your wool in there or whatever you want to put on top. I don't like them. I tried them for several seasons. I don't think the bees did very well with them. I would more go with insulation on the inner cover than this quilt box with some sort of something in it, just as an aside. There's a lesson on winterization in the program, and that's what is going to be there. That's part of that lesson. So,
And I had a quick question. I don't know if it applies to a lot of people since it sounds like a lot are getting nukes, but when you get a package, just because last year when I got a package, I ended up getting a dud queen. She like was just doing drone laying for the most part. But do you know if any providers or if it's normal for providers to give any kind of like guaranteed queen viability or anything like that? Or if it's worth asking your providers when you go to pick up your packages?
yeah,
Or
I
is
would
it-
ask him. I would ask him. I would say to them in a, play the dumb guy kind of thing. I understand that queens coming out sometimes that they don't get well mated, or there's a percentage, you could say small percentage, although it's not necessarily small, queens that don't do well. If I happen to have a problem with a queen and give you a call, is it possible that if the queen is not, and I have somebody come look at it and the queen's not doing well, is it possible to get a replacement queen from you? What do I do in that situation? Put it on them to answer. Now, a reputable person, one that I used to work with all the time when I bought packages, would say, we have a cache of spare queens. We understand that there's going to be problems. They do. They know. Believe me, they know. And they say, if you have a problem with a queen, give us a call. We'll give you another one. We'll even sometimes come and help you install it or do whatever to correct the situation. That's the right thing to do. I don't know who you're working with and what they're going to do. Some people, to be fair, they don't want to get involved in all that. They do their good deed by taking their trailer and hooking it up to their truck, driving down to Georgia for the Bee Club, and bring all the packages back and disseminate them out in the Costco parking lot. And that's the end of their commitment. And you're talking to that guy who's like, yeah, just get the things off my trailer. I want to go home. It's been a long ride. I just came from Georgia. What do you mean? Will I give you a replacement queen? I don't mean to be cheeky about it, but that's the honest setup, right? So you have to ask. All in all, though, where are you located?
I'm up in central Idaho.
Idaho. Yeah. So go to your Bee Club and ask around who would have a reputable queen for me to buy. Best defense is a good offense, right? Should that happen, at least hey, I see a queen thing. I'm going to execute plan B and go buy a queen and look up the information about how to do a queen replacement and, be prepared. We talk about one of the lessons is queen failure in summer. Just what you described. It's not uncommon, actually, that queens conk out in summertime. They get going gangbusters, but they didn't get mated well, and they don't have enough material in the spermatheca to keep going through the rest of the season. They usually make it to about July or whatever, and they peter out, and you end up with a supersedure or some other problems. So you have to be hyper vigilant in checking your queens all season as you until you're locked in. I'm sure you know that already, but
Now, yeah.
yeah, have a plan and ask your provider. Don't be bashful. Most of the reputable ones will give you a "this is what you should do" response. And if they don't, you can get mad about it, or you could just smile and nod and know that you're going to go have your own contingency and caveat emptor, right? You'll know next time, maybe I find a different provider who's going to back up their sale. I do feel for people who volunteer to, go down and get packages and do whatever. That's a really soul searching journey to go bring back bees, because all the way back coming through Virginia or wherever you are, people are like, God, just let me get there. No problem, People who tell you they do that, that's nerve-wracking. Even if they've done 20 trips, the 21st one is as nerve-wracking as the first one. That's the truth. So I feel for them. Yeah. I know, Vanessa, you had a couple questions.
I did. Thank you. So just being a little paranoid, I had a hive come through winter that was really strong. So the one at the house was doing great. And so I did a split on the 29th. I went ahead, I was able to find the queen. I put her into a separate box. I had a whole bunch of honey frames that we recovered from the dead out. So I was able to kind of pack her full of resources, give her her own hive. I left the other one by itself next to it.
Yeah.
Gave it a week. It was like I literally did it and then left the state, right? So I like couldn't touch them. I came back this like 8 days later and I put a super on the one that I took the queen out of. And like it wasn't just the queen, it was the queen and like 4 frames worth of bees.
Yeah.
'Cause
Okay.
I had lots. I can see that they're both, there's definitely still like bees being born. I see orientation flights like in the late afternoon, they're happening. So this past weekend I put a super on the hive that I took the queen from, and I added the second deep to the split, and I gave her a feeder full of sugar water,
Okay.
and I put more frames of honey. I put some frames of honey, a feeder, and then I just didn't have any more drawn deep frames there. I just, having learned from last year when my queen went out in the summertime and my bees got real mean, I'm like, I do not want to touch that hive until they have a new queen, which like best case scenario is the 16th, right? Because I pulled the old queen on the 29th. Should I be doing anything else with them?
So let's go through a couple things. And I'm
Okay.
going to rewind the tape to when I did what you did. And what I had was hit and miss. And so I'll say this for everybody, not just to answer your question. Early season splits are a 50-50 proposition, early.
Mine
This
was
is
early.
early. This
Yeah.
is still pretty early. Even if a box is like, I have one that's same as yours, fully. And I stood over and said, should I split the thing? I'm actually going to split it this weekend, maybe.
Mhm.
When you make a split, you move the bees to the box right next to it. And any of the foragers that came from the origin hive probably left and went back, which left your split with fewer bees than you put in there. That may or may not be okay, but now you have to think that you put them in a full-size deep and you took 5 frames. You have a small nuke, that's what it is, in a larger box. That's as much space as they can handle and probably more, especially if some of the bees left and went back. So if you put a box on top, you made the space even bigger.
Hard to
So
heat, right?
I would go back at some point and take that top box off that one and compact them back in.
Okay.
They're going to be fine in that single box. Now your other box,
But hold on. But the first box was totally full of between bees and resources. So that's why
the
I went and
split
put
that
the
you
second
made,
one on. Yeah,
the
the
split that you
split
made. Yeah, but
was a
they're going to
single.
eat, they're going to eat the food as they grow. And as
Yeah.
they eat the food, the queen's going to lay in the place that they emptied.
Yeah.
So they don't need more space. And they don't have a workforce to go out and collect stuff. Because
Okay.
you diminished them
It just-
down to 4, right?
Yeah.
So they're a third of the size they were before. They need to
Mm.
build 2 or 3 generations, and then you're going to have to worry about giving them space to fill. They're not
Okay.
there yet.
Okay, so go back
Right
when I get
plan,
home and
right?
take.
Take the wind out of the big hive
Mhm.
and split the resources, but then let them grow into the full box. And
Yeah.
when you start to see them packing things in where the other thing is they don't have bees to go out and get water. They have to dilute the honey that you gave them. It's not nectar, right? So they need forager force to produce that stuff. So they're going to ease their way through that box. So I would take the top off
Okay.
and leave them compact in the single box.
And then, all right, yeah, because I mean, in the hive that came out of winter, she was already laying drone, so that's why
Yep,
I
I have the
was-
same thing. She's laying drones and she will
Yeah.
There.
Hey, bud.
That was cute.
Okay, so good. I'll take that one off. And then, so I have a
Now,
feeder.
the
and
other
then
one, I think now that you've taken the wind out of their sails, it's not that far. It's just a little further along than the other one. And by the way, you took the queen away from them. So they have no queen, which means they're not going to have a budding workforce to generate this mass that's going to swarm away. They're in recovery mode. So
Yeah.
to put resources on them, a box on top of them doesn't make sense either. They need to get a new queen established and get eggs laying, and then they'll brood, and then you're going to build up. So if you put a box on them,
I did.
I
Put a
would
medium.
tell you the same thing. They don't need it. They're not going to use it.
Okay, I'll take it off. Yeah, it was one of those things where I just keep having these business trips, so I have like 2 hours a weekend, and
I
I'm just
know.
afraid of getting ahead
Yeah,
of them.
I've been there and done that.
Yeah. Okay, so then that's
But
fine.
one thing to tell you, just to round out the story, I did early splits. I wanted to see what would happen. How early can you make a split? Very same time frame. Cold snap came through like this week. All of the bees where the queen laid eggs out to the perimeter of the nest contracted because it got cold to come together, and they abandoned all the brood to the outside and lost it all. If I'd have waited 2 more weeks, they would have been okay. But because of the cold snap, you might find that that's what you're going to find because they don't have enough bees.
To keep it warm.
They'll think survival, and they'll come together in the cluster, and whatever brood they had in progress. And the other thing that happened from that, just to keep you on notice, is it stressed the colony really bad, and they developed European foul brood because that's a
No.
stress disease. And I've dealt with European foul brood as a failsafe to what I did, just
Yeah.
passing it on. So in the future, early splits, keep them right sized. I would still tell you that's a little too early, Vanessa.
We had just had
I
the
saw
split
your text message.
presentation.
I should have called you back. And
No, it's okay. We had just had the split presentation. I was just convinced they were all going to leave me. And with that in
Yeah.
mind, my father-in-law built me a swarm box. But my drawn, so the swarm box that we have is built like the square one from, what is that, Hive Collective or whatever that website is, and it's made for, like the deep frames to go into the 14-gallon, and the deep frames that I have left with drawn comb are the ones that came from my nuke, and they're pretty funky.
Yeah,
So I was
that's
like,
perfect.
that's good, but then they're gonna end up in my hive again, and I wasn't trying to put them back
Well,
in a hive.
That's the catch-22. I see Bob laughing.
This is like,
You
so
take this old
freebies.
crusty frames
Keep the
out,
old gross frames. Okay.
fire, and you go, I don't have any frames to put in I'll put them in here.
Yeah.
And the good
Okay.
news, if you catch a new colony in there, Vanessa, what
Yeah.
you do is you put them in the box, like we talked about the nuke earlier, everybody, and let it get established. And then you put your new frames in and you let them get established. And as you're building out that box, rotate the old frames, the crusty ones that came out of your swarm trap, to the outside, and keep putting new ones in the middle by the brood chamber. And eventually you can pull those frames out as you go and rotate in all new as they build across.
Okay. I'll do that.
It's the
Better than
life of-
putting in mediums. Better than putting in mediums with drawn comb. Still
Yeah.
put in the old funky stuff.
Put the old funky stuff in.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. We're still 20 minutes to go to 9 o'clock. I'm going to try and beat the record. Any other questions? Anything, folks? I'm okay to stay, like I said, but
I had a quick question. And I think either you or I know from listening to your podcast, that Bob has made one like the Vino Farms style
yeah.
frames. So I made some of those before. I've got 2 hives that had those. The only issue I had with them, and I don't know if it was maybe just those hives because they hadn't grown out they hadn't drawn out the full length of those by the time winter came. So the bottoms, for some reason through winter, I had a big mold issue on the bottom, like the bottom rails, the wood rails of the frames. And I was just curious if that happened, if Bob, you had anything like that happen, or, you know, I probably just need to maybe add some ventilation, I guess, which I feel like kind of defeats the purpose of the super insulation box, but
Yeah, I've not had, so that type of hive is called a bee barn. And what it basically is a deep super and a medium super. And then there are 2-inch insulation that's built around it, and then 2 bys on the outside of that. And that's your brood nest.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting mold in there, then that tells me that, you know, you need some additional ventilation. Something is not quite right. So you have I guess you have an entrance in the at the bottom. Is that
Mhm.
where your entrance is? Like the barn doors? Again, they call it a bee barn.
Right.
Got the doors that open up.
Yeah, I've just got the entrance. I mean, the bottom is basically like a standard hive, right?
Okay.
Everything else is different above. And then I've had that entrance reducer I keep on my hive, and it's only got, you know, like a 3-inch, maybe 2.5-inch wide by, you know, the normal bee space height.
Yeah.
But I can slip in, because I have one of those oxalic, like paddle
Vaporizers. Oh,
vaporizer.
yeah.
It's
okay.
not one of the
You got a
fancy ones.
wand.
It was one of the
A wand, yeah.
yeah, I want. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Do you have an upper entrance? Any ventilation at the top?
I didn't during the winter. During the summer months, I would kind of prop up the inner cover so that
Yeah.
they could go in and out through that.
Yeah.
But I thought that during winter you would want it all closed off, was kind of the idea of that, right?
Yeah. Well, so again, I have mine all closed off in the winter that way. But I would say if it sounds like you're having a moisture issue, I might consider, a small upper entrance even in the winter to allow that hot, moist air to get out. Kevin?
Yeah. I have a question. Did you feed in the fall?
I did feed in the fall. It was kind of late, and I didn't feed as much as I probably should
Kind
have.
of
But
late. Okay, when you feed late, they will try to evaporate all the moisture that you give them. Should be 2-to-1. Going back to the first question of the night, 2-to-1. And
right.
they'll evaporate the one part out and convert the sugar into storage. But sometimes if you feed really late, they don't finish the job, and they leave some of that open nectar in there. And then what ends up happening over winter is you have a wet compartment where that stuff is evaporating out, and it's creating a higher than normal moisture. And that typically settles down in the cold, down in the bottom, and forms mold. You'll find mold on the bottom edges of some of the frames sometimes. In it, I found it actually yesterday. I had a dead out from a polystyrene hive, and all of the frames down on the bottom had a green mold on the frames. You could give that back to the bees. It won't harm them. They'll clean that up. But it's because I fed that hive so late, like what you talked about, that it was probably too wet, and they left unripened nectar in the cells. And over winter, that caused moisture problem, and the high moisture creates the mold. That's one possible option, although I like what Bob's telling you about check the box and make sure that if it needs ventilation, give it ventilation.
Okay. And were you saying that it was okay to use those frames if they had a little bit of mold on the bottom
Yep,
again?
it's perfectly fine. They'll scrupulously clean that all off and make it go away. They have no problem with it.
Okay.
You know, when they move into a bee tree that's been occupied by another hive and abandoned for whatever reason, maybe the hive died or whatever, that whole thing is a wet, moist mess. And they go in and rehabilitate the entire cavity and make it their own. And then if it's moldy and whatever, they get rid of it all. So it's a natural occurrence in nature. They clean that stuff up. And I would not hesitate if you pull out a frame from a dead out, it has like a sheen of green mold on it and whatever. as long as it's not mushy and funky, I would put that right back in, no problem.
Oh man, I just threw out a few
Oh,
frames,
no.
but that's all
Well,
right.
fresh, clean wax is always a nice way to go too.
Yeah, yeah, I did that because I had noticed on one, because this was the second year. I thought the first year was a fluke. It was only on like 2 frames where I found some mold and I reused them. And then when I looked at them this year, I saw that they had like totally propolized the whole bottom of that frame. It was propolis that was pretty thick. I would say like at least an 1/8 inch thick over the whole bottom of that frame.
Well,
Which
that's interesting.
they also made a lot of propolis in a lot of the rest of the hive, so maybe it was just that pollen.
Propolis is great.
I don't know.
Love propolis, adopt it. It's amazing when they make a lot of propolis. It's really good for them. It's an immunity booster in so many ways that we just can't understand.
I
Yeah.
got another question.
Go ahead, Jack.
I have an elevated deck in the back of my house. Up on the railing, I put a box up there, 2 mediums with a comb in the upper box, using that as a swarm trap, hopefully.
Mhm.
I got a strap down to the railing. And if it works, and B, I do get a swarm in there, I got about 50 feet to where I want to put the hive. Do I have to put it away remotely for a period, or is that 50 feet a little too far to move it immediately?
Yeah, it's that rule 3 feet or 3 miles. You know that rule, Jack?
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
move them 3 feet a day and they'll stay anchored until you get it where you want. In a 50-foot run, that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
You could do one of 2 things. You could give it a try.
Since
You
they
pick that thing
have-
up and move it over to where you want it. And you see all the bees come back and cluster where they were on the deck. Put another box there, not the one you had, and let them collect in that. And every night, walk them back and dump them in the hive. Eventually, you'll get them all. Or the other thing you could do is move it away. Now, sometimes, the common wisdom is if you had bees on the deck and you wanted to move them 50 yards out, you get a cold night like tonight where they're all inside.
Yeah.
And you pick up the box and you move it to your 50 feet spot and you open it in the morning after a while, but you block the entrance with grass, twigs, something, so that when they come out, they encounter some sort of barrier that wasn't there before and they realize the situation has changed. And some say that forces them to reorient. We've talked about this before. It's almost like, imagine if the bees are up in a tree and the tree falls down from a storm and now they're down on the ground. What are they going to do? They have to figure out that something has changed. And
Yeah.
when you move them 50 feet and you leave them closed up for a while, and then you block off the entrance by putting a pile of grass that they have to dig through to get out of the actual hive, after being locked up for a couple days, they may reorient. But the fail-safe, what I say is take a spare nuke box and put it where the hive was. There's another thing to think about. If they move into your box on your deck and you don't move them for a day or two, they're going to fly. And when they fly, the foragers go out. They don't necessarily come back at night, but in the morning, they'll return after having rested out into the universe. And they'll find that the hive is gone. So you would want to put something there for them to come back to. If they find a hive that's not theirs, you had a single deep sitting on a bottom board with a roof, and the swarm moved in, and then you moved that your 50 feet. You take a nuke box and you put it back. The bee will come back and go, I thought this was a big hive, but it's a hive. I'll go inside, because they have nothing else they could do. And they hang out in there on the frame. And then you walk over and shake that frame into your full-size hive that you moved. And if you keep doing that, you'll eventually get all the bees to go, okay, I
Yeah.
guess I live here now.
Yeah.
I've done that with success. I have. And not had to take them 3 miles to somebody else. But one of the things I'll tell everybody here, find a friend in beekeeping. Sometimes when I need to move a hive, I go to Bob's house or Bob comes to me, right? Because we know each other and we live relatively close. So maybe you take that box over to Pauline's house if she lives near you. And then in a couple days after they've oriented, did whatever and settled in, you go back to Pauline's, close it off at night and bring it back home. Right?
Right.
Or Chris or Anthony or anybody else,
Yeah,
right? Find a
right.
friend in beekeeping.
Another question
Mm-hmm.
that I wonder about, shouldn't be a problem though. Here in Maryland, we have supposedly keep the hive 10 feet inside your border.
Yeah.
Well, my neighbor over there, I asked him if I could put my hives over on him, but it's going to be closer than 10 feet from his line. You know, that should not be a problem.
Wait, let me get this straight. You're putting it on his property
His property.
and he's
I
okay
asked-
with that.
He's okay with it.
Yeah, then I think you're okay. I don't know if you need to go like get a formal written, something goes south. What are you gonna do? That's the question you have to ask yourself, Jack. What are you gonna do? I
Yeah.
have a neighbor next to me that has a 6-acre field, and I discussed with him about putting bees over there, and he said it would be okay. But I haven't had the conversation with him with when it's not okay. And you'll get a phone call from your neighbor saying, listen, we decided to do and we need that land. Can you move your bees tomorrow? And you can't. Right? So just think through it, Jack. But if you have this arrangement and everything's good and you've been neighbors forever and you're okay with it, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm out in the country and this neighboring farmer.
Yeah. I can't imagine you could be in violation of being too close to your border. The way you described it, I think you'll be
Yeah.
any state apiarist would go, okay, I'm not going to give you a hassle about that. So hopefully.
What it was in the swarm trap, it's used hive. The boxes are used. Would old wax, I used to keep bees back in the 80s and then I stopped. And I was rooting around the other day and I ran across about 20 pounds of beeswax. What can I do with that?
How
Since
is it melted wax that you melted down,
Yes.
or it's beeswax on
Yes.
frames?
got
Melted.
propolis in it too.
Yeah. You could put some of that in your swarm trap. You know it's clean, right? It's your wax.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, it's clean. It's my wax.
Yeah. Do you know how to wax it? Are you using plastic foundation?
No, it's comb.
You're using honeycomb, but do you have foundation somewhere that's
No,
storage? Okay.
no, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's clean enough that you know.
I
it's
was
not a
wondering if
problem.
I melt it and paint the sides of the hive. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could. Now, this is the thing. If it's that old, it may or may not have pesticides in it. You don't know because they used Roundup back then and they used neonicotinoids and things like that at some point. So, you know, this is the thing that I'll tell everybody. It's a good point to say it. I think I mentioned it on the last call. Once you're a beekeeper for X number of years, you want to take your comb out and replace it. I think 3 to 4 years is a good number. 5 is probably the longest.
Yeah.
Some beekeepers don't care about this, but given the primordial ooze of things that get sprayed on stuff that your bees are bringing back every day, and the fact that wax is highly attractive to all of those chemicals and they have long shelf lives, it's really in your best interest to keep your bees on fresh wax. And so if you have really old wax frames, like somebody said they got frames from someone else or whatever, if it's old, get rid of it. Now, in this case, I guess that goes against Jack. If that stuff was really old when you melted it, I don't know what's in it. So would I tell you to paint it on the inside of your box?
Well,
I don't know.
It was my own wax, you know, from my own bees.
Yeah. If it's
But-
relatively clean and you're okay with it, sure. It doesn't hurt to put that stuff inside. The bees will chew it off and use it. And
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it would help. Yeah, all right.
yeah, I mean, that's one of those personal preference, right? I won't tell you what you can do. I'll tell you to think it through. And if there's any sense that any of that wax is contaminated just from being old and
Yeah,
then maybe you want to think hard about reusing it for that type of purpose. You don't want to start new bees on old mess, right?
no,
But I'm all for recycling, as you hear, so. All right, I'm going to do last call. It's almost 9 o'clock. We made it anyway. And I'm happy to have all the questions.
I'm going to say bye and thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
I'm gonna say goodbye too. Thank you.
All right, we can sign off. Anybody last question? Want to be the last one for the night?
I wanted to say thanks. I don't have necessarily a question, but I had a quick thought about from listening to your podcast
Yeah,
and your I've been following your treatment-free experiment, which sounds really interesting. And it
Yeah.
made me think about not just creating, possibly you not just creating a more resistant, better bee, but possibly also just creating a less impactful varroa mite. So like if your
Yeah.
mite populations that you happen to be raising with your bees, you know, happen to not be carrying all the other diseases or whatever, you know, it's just a side thought.
yeah, I mean, the magic sauce is how do we keep you're not going to get rid of and eliminate varroa mites. So
Right.
how do we make them get along? And
Yeah.
lately the science has changed to be, don't kill all the varroa mites, just keep them at bay so that the bees can live with them. And I think you've been hearing some of that if you're listening to my show, that's been the mantra lately from the scientists is even with Viroxan won't do a hard kill, but it will keep them at bay. But if they get above and beyond the threshold where they do a lot of damage, you can't bring them back from that. And so the new treatment strategies coming out of the chemical companies is maybe we shouldn't be trying for that, knockout punch. Maybe we should be trying to eliminate the varroa from having an overwhelming impact. You'll be interested to hear what comes out this week about Viroxan and what they said. I don't know if you heard me say about supreme hives, like hives that are massive population.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote back to me to say that the reason why they don't think that Viroxan is a good fit for middle of the season high nectar flow is because there's too many bees for the bees to spread the material around effectively. It lessens the efficacy. So they want you to use it at a time when there's less bees so that the spread of the actual oxalic acid is more effective. I thought, well, that's an interesting little derivative on the instructions, right? Because the EPA makes them write the instructions for the label, but that came from the company itself. And it's going to change, I think, the perspective of what some people think, how to use that product. So got to keep your ear to the ground and keep following all this stuff. But yeah. Hey, Bob, check your phone. Did you get photographs from me?
I did. Mason bee.
Okay.
I responded, mason bees.
Okay, yeah. So the swarm that I got a call from, I mentioned earlier, the guy keeps calling me and say, these bees are on my wood pile. It's a swarm. That's what it is, those things. They're
Yeah,
just getting a taste of something, aren't they? What do you think they're doing on that wood pile?
yeah, I don't know, maybe gathering some resin, whatever, moisture,
I
but
thought
they're
that was
mason,
really quick.
they're mason bees.
Darn if he wasn't right. There's bees visiting his wood pile.
I got a call for a cutout this week, Kevin.
Did you?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about to come full circle, Bob.
yeah. Next week when it warms up,
Yeah,
Is-
next week it's going to explode.
forms are gonna be
That's
all
what
over the
this week's
place.
show is about, by the way.
Yep,
Talked about that, right? The dynamic of it either trickles in when the weather's nice or when they're sequestered in the hive. Holy cow, it's like, this is weird, isn't it? You get to hear me preview what I talked to. I recorded the Sunday show already. Done with it.
right.
I found what are you wearing, Bob, over your shirt there? What do you got?
This
Yeah,
is my insulated hoodie.
hoodie. Guess what
Yeah.
I found? You know what a fencing veil is, right?
Yes,
The veil that the thing comes out and you can
Yep.
take a drink and zip it back up.
yep.
Imagine if you took that hoodie and you sewed a veil in it. They sell a hoodie with a veil.
They
How
do.
freaking cool is that? I was so excited to see that. I'm like, oh my God, Sharon, check this thing out. This is so cool. Because I could see going to a bee meeting wearing a hoodie and going, huh, they're going to open a hive. Right? What an ingenious idea. Unfortunately, the thing's being sold from Europe. I was so excited when I saw that, though. I was like, damn, that's cool. That's roundtable number 5 this week.
I think I saw a YouTube video about someone basically just sewing on a zipper screen on their hoodie. That's what they made their bee equipment out of a few years ago. So
Yeah.
you can always DIY it, I guess.
That'll work.
Well, what I say is, I don't know, Bob, do you want to be standing there in July in 98 degrees with 98% humidity wearing a hoodie? I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think
But
so.
there are times a year, like right now, where that thing would be perfect.
Yeah.
I'd be all over that. Who's it? Oh, okay. Trying to figure out what's behind me. All right, folks, I'm gonna go. Bob,
Yep.
you too.
Me too.
I
Thank
didn't hit
you.
dinner yet. Bob, I'll give you a call. I want to ask you a question about something.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.